Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my weekly monologue. This is episode 2 of the 2024 year. Last week, we were able to get one episode off maybe 5 minutes before the ball dropped. So here we are in 2024, and what a glorious year it's already starting out to be. My Indiana Pacers, as you can tell, I'm rocking the hat right now. We're on a 6 game winning streak. Let's go. They lost to the Boston Celtics last night, unfortunately, but I mean, hey, what do you expect? The Celtics are the best team in the East, I believe, at this current time. So, no hard feelings there. I just love seeing Tyrese Halliburton do his thing, Benedict Mathurin doing his thing, Miles Turner still a pacer doing his thing, and hey, the team is still winning. So we love Indiana basketball over here. And in other news, as of today, January the 7th, the New York Jets won Week 18 against the New England Patriots, snapping a 15-game losing streak in 2,933 days.
Let's go, New York Jets!
Ah, yes, we love the Jets around here. I've been a Jets fan since, oh my God, 2007, I believe. So yeah, losing to the Patriots is a very common thing, and I'm glad that yeah, it's finally over with. Now, the future for Zach Wilson seems kind of uncertain. I don't really know where the team's going to go from here with him. I know that Aaron Rodgers has kind of hinted at coming back next year. That's still up in the air at this time. But it seems that Zach Wilson has played his final game in a New York Jets jersey. I love Zach Wilson, and it's just disappointing that his tenure with the Jets is potentially over with. Especially because he was perfect backup for Aaron Rodgers. However, the grass may be greener on the other side for him and for us. So, if this was your final game on the sidelines, Zach Wilson, since he did not play, we say salute to you and thank you for your many 2 years as a New York Jet. Um, Bouncing off of what we discussed last week, we talked about the New York Knicks and Toronto Raptors trading RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly for OG Anunoby and Precious Achua. The New York Knicks, since they've acquired Achua and OG, are 4-0, so it seems that the trade is working in their favor. So shout out to the Knicks at this current time. Um, I hope that you guys make the playoffs this year. I think you will. Releasing Taj Gibson though today. What an interesting turn of events. Not that Taj Gibson was really doing anything; he was just kind of there. But that's a veteran. He's a locker room presence, and he's Tom Thibodeau's boy. All the years together in Chicago they had, and you're just gonna release Taj Gibson like that? It is what it is. We're moving on though. Um, And last week, we weren't able to get into any UFC talk, which was the kind of primary focus on why I wanted to actually do these weekly monologues. Was that I would really love to break down the UFC cards and kind of see what kind of predictions we have, discuss the matchups, and hopefully we can predict these cards correctly, as I've done in the past. And hey, maybe I can win you some money if you take my advice along the way. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start looking at our first card of the year of 2024 UFC Fight Night. Ankalaev versus Walker number 2. And if you remember the last time these two matched up, the doctor was the one who stopped the fight because he asked Ankalaev, "Do you know where you are right now?" After a potentially, could have been a concussion at the time. And he said, "Yes, I'm in the desert." And the doctor said, "No, he's not fit to continue fighting. He has no idea where he's at. This man is injured." So they stopped the fight. What a sad day for UFC fans. It was a beautiful matchup. Johnny Walker had surprised Uncle Ive at one part. He kind of acted like he was hurt, and then when Uncle Ive charged him, he threw like this up jumping knee strike that was beautiful. And if it would have hit, Uncle Ive would have been asleep on the friggin' mat, but it didn't hit. So now we're doing a rematch because doctor stoppage, unfortunately. And the winner of this fight, I believe, has a good chance. The winner of this fight at light heavyweight has a good chance to fight Alex Pereira for the belt. But We'll see when we get there. You know, there's still Jerry Prochaska and Jamal Hill who have to. Well, no, Alex actually beat Jerry. So yeah, Jamal Hill would be the next up. It depends on how his injury is going, his recovery. Torn Achilles is that's not an easy thing to come back from, especially in a sport such as MMA. But if we take a look at the card, going starting with the prelims, because I watched them all. The first fight being Joshua Van versus Felipe Bunez. I'm assuming is how you say his name. Joshua Van 9-1. He's a freestyle fighter versus Bunez, who is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. Looks like Van's last two victories came over Borges and Jumagulov in the UFC, and for Bunez, that he's making his UFC debut. Um, I would go ahead and lean more towards Van in this one because he's 9-1 and Bunez is 13-6. So if we're going to build us a little parlay, you know, we're gonna go ahead and predict the winners of each fight on here. We're gonna start the first one off with Joshua Van. I'm not really going to say if I think he's going to win via KO, submission, or decision because in his last five fights, it looks like Van has victories in decision, decision, submission, knockout, submission. So he's kind of a freestyle fighter, as they say. You know, it's a mix of everything. Van opening up as a negative 225 favorite, Bunez being a plus 185 underdog. Next up, looks like we've got Nicolas Mota versus Tom Nolan. Nolan is 6-0 and Mota is 13-5. Mota opens up as a plus 265 underdog, while Nolan is a minus 340 favorite. Let's take a look at their previous fights and see what we should decide to do with these. So it looks like excuse me. Looks like Mota's last fight was against in Ogden, which was a no contest. He lost in June 2023 to Torres. And then his last victory came in September 2022 against Van Camp, which he won by knockout. So Mota's pretty exceptional. It looks like he's got a lot of wins by knockout and a lot of losses by knockout. Tom Nolan, of course, 6-0, undefeated. His last four wins have been by KO. So let's go ahead and go with Nolan in this next one. Seems like the safe bet. I mean, he's undefeated. Mota having some losses going for him, especially within the last year. However, he could surprise us and get a dub. You know, that's always a good reason to kind of bounce back after you've had a rough year. You know, and you want to keep your UFC career alive. So yeah, you go out, you get a big win, go out and get fight of the night. Dana White will reward you tremendously. But we're gonna go with another favorite in that one with Tom Nolan. Moving on. Oh man, these odds are crazy. Weston Wilson, 16-8, opens up at a plus 550 underdog, while his opponent could be John, could be Gene Silva. 11-2 is a negative 900 favorite. Excuse me, I think I said Weston Wilson was a favorite. He's an underdog. So let's take a look at some of their previous fights. Silva won five in a row. Well, probably more than five in a row, but just looking at his previous fights, looks like he made his debut in the UFC at Dana White's Contender Series against Vallejos on September the 5th. Won by decision in 3 rounds. And Weston Wilson is coming off of a loss to Brito in his UFC debut. So yeah, let's just go ahead and take Silva in this one. Another favorite. Surprise, surprise. This card is stacked up. Seems pretty one-sided so far for some of these fighters. Up next on the prelims, we have a Farid Basharat at 11-0 versus Taylor Lapilis, I'm assuming, at 19-3. I cannot believe that happened. Let's take a look at Lapalus and Basharat's last fight. So Basharat, undefeated, of course, 11-0. He's had 2 victories in the UFC, one at Dana White's Contender Series. 2 of them have been by decision, and one of them was by submission. If we look at Lapalus, looks like he is also on quite a win streak. He defeated a Logren on September 2nd, 2023 by decision at UFC Fight Night, Gane versus Spivak. So that was his UFC debut. He's 1-0 in the UFC, and it looks like Basharat is 2-0. Unless you want to count Dana White's Contender Series, then he would be 3-0. Uh let's look at what their fight styles are. They're both just mixed martial arts is all that it says for them. Basharat is the favorite at a negative 260, while Lapalus is a underdog at plus 210. Uh Looks like Basharat has some pretty good striking, significant strike accuracy, and he's got pretty good takedown accuracy at 53%. Let's go ahead and keep it rolling with the favorites. We're going to go with Basharat in the next round or in the next fight. That one's probably gonna come down to being like one of the better fights of the night, where they're pretty evenly matched up. I can't really pick one myself. Looking at their fight history, up next on the card, we'll have Marcus McGee at 8-1 versus Gaston Bolaños. He's 7-3. McGee opens up at a negative 275 favorite, and Bolaños is a plus 225 underdog. Pretty similar in height and reach. Let's take a look at some of their previous fights. I've seen Marcus McGee fight a few times. He's the real deal. Since he's been in the UFC, he's 2-0. His last fight coming by knockout in the first round, and then he has a submission victory on April 29th, 2003 against Newsom. And he knocked out Baez. Looks like Gaston Bolaños has 1 win in his UFC debut against Phillips. The rest of his victories coming from Bellator by knockout. He's got 2 losses on there in a row by submission. So, Marcus McGee is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, while Bolaños is a striker. Man, here we go with the favorites again. I'm not usually this prone to just picking favorites all the time, but I think we're going to go with Marcus McGee on this one. He seems to have some submission wins, and his opponent seems to have some submission losses. So we're going to go with that. Up next on the prelims, Matthew Semmelsberger at 11-6 versus Preston Parsons. Semmelsberger is 11-6. Parsons is 10-4. He's a little bit taller, Semmelsberger. Let's look at some of their previous fights. While we're loading that up, Semmelsberger opens up at a negative 125 favorite. Parsons is a plus 105 underdog. Looks like Semmelsberger's on a 2-fight losing streak. He got knocked out in the 3rd round against Medic. He lost via decision to Wells. His last win coming on December 17th, 2022, at a decision against a Matthews. Parsons, of course, is coming off of a loss also March 25th, 2003 against Giles. April 23rd, 2022, he got a decision victory over Elder. And looks like he lost to D-Rod in his debut. So that's kind of a big fight to make your UFC debut. And he got knocked out in the first round on July 17th, 2021. So this is kind of an interesting matchup. Neither of these guys really have anything impressive going for them. Semmelsberger is the favorite. Parsons is the underdog, just for the sake of finally throwing an underdog into the Predictions, we're going to go with Parsons to secure a win, Simmelsberger to get 3 straight losses. I don't know what his UFC contract is like, but hey, 3 straight losses is not a really good way to kind of keep your career rolling. So good luck to Simmelsberger, of course, but we're going to roll with Preston Parsons. And the final fight of the prelims, Andre Arlovsky. This guy's been fighting forever. He's 44 years old, former heavyweight champion in the UFC, will be fighting Waldo Cortez Acosta. Arlovsky 6'3", Acosta 6'4". Arlovsky comes in at a plus 425 underdog. Cortez Acosta comes in at a negative 600 favorite. Arlovsky is without a doubt a gatekeeper in the UFC in the heavyweight division. If you can beat him, then you can move on to fighting ranked opponents. If not, then they kind of have a better understanding on where you fit in, among the fray. Looks like Arlovsky's coming off 2 straight losses. June 3rd, 2023, he was knocked out in the second round. October 29th, 2022, he was submitted in the first round. And his last victory came over Jake Collier on April 30th, 2022 by decision. And let's take a look at Waldo Cortez Acosta's resume. He's 10-1, so that's pretty good. Arlovsky, of course, is 34-22. So yeah, he's been at it for a long time. Cortez Acosta is coming off of a knockout win in the first round on August 26, 2023. And he had a loss on April 29th, 2023 by decision. Looks like they both lost to De Lima, looking at their fight history. So that's interesting. I guess Dilemma should actually be the gatekeeper of UFC heavyweights. Um, this is an interesting matchup. I personally think that Arlovsky still has some to give, but at these records, 10-1, it seems like Waldo Cortez Acosta could be on the come up. So let's go with another favorite, Cortez Acosta. Why are these fights so one-sided? They seem. Arlovsky, of course, is great, but the odds are not in his favor. So that will wrap up the prelims. Um, Very interesting prelims. I think we literally took all the favorites except for one, and that was just because for the sake of choosing an underdog. So that's interesting. Now let's move on to the main card, the one that everybody likes the most. Half of these guys, I don't know if I've even seen them fight. I know I have because I watch UFC religiously, but they're not very memorable. No offense to a lot of these guys. But one that is memorable and is kicking off the main card is Phil Hawes. 12-5. Phil Hawes is going to be fighting Bruno Ferreira. 10-1. Phil Hawes is they're both negative. So Phil Hawes has a negative 105 and Bruno Ferreira is negative 115. I guess you could say this is a pretty close matchup. They don't know who's going to win this one. Looks like their striking is pretty similar. They both throw about 5 to 6 significant strikes per round, with Phil Hawes having the advantage at 67% of accuracy, throwing significant strikes. Phil Hawes, of course, is coming off of 2 fights in a row, 2-fight losing streak. Excuse me. Alaskarov, he lost by knockout. Dolidze, he lost by knockout. One of these fights, Phil Hawes, I remember watching it live. He tore something in his knee. He stayed in there until he got KO'd. It was kind of a sad ending for him. I'm not sure if that was against Dolidze or Alaskarov. I would imagine Alaskarov because that was back in May. So he had a lot to recover from. 2-fight losing streak. Looks like Bruno Ferreira is also coming off of a loss to Ruziboev, where he was knocked out in the first round. Man, not the greatest matchups to kick off the year, but you know what? I'm going to lean towards Phil Hawes actually kind of getting back in there again. I mean, 2-fight losing streak, coming off of a knee injury. I want to say it was like a torn ACL or something. Let's double check that real quick. Yeah, I think Hawes is ready to make his return to. I don't necessarily want to say greatness, but make his return to actually being good. Roman Dolidze is actually who did it. So he's had a fight since then. Impressive. And lost again. That kind of makes me want to lean a little bit more towards Bruno Ferreira. But you know what? We'll stick with him. Come on, Phil Haas. I believe in you. All right. Up next, we have Ricky Simon, 20-4, versus Mario Bautista, 13-2. This is actually a very underrated fight at bantamweight. Ricky Simon and Mario Bautista are both really tough fighters. Simon is the favorite at -175. Bautista is the underdog at +145. I'm leaning more towards going with Bautista in this fight. He's a better striker. He's got good takedown uh, accuracy as well. Looks like Simon's more of the takedown artist than Bautista is, even though Simon's a striker, Bautista's freestyle. Ricky Simon coming off of a loss to Song Yadong on April 29, 2023. He was knocked out in the 5th round. But before that, he has looks like a decent number of wins. Shore, Asunso, Brian Kelleher, Perello. Bautista is on a winning streak right now. Last win coming over Blackshear on August 19th by decision. He's got 3 submission wins in a row after that, and then another decision win. So we're going to go with the underdog in this matchup, Mario Bautista, 13-2. And I think that a win over Simon would only help propel Bautista's rise to the top to get a. I don't want to say he's up next at bantamweight, because Sean O'Malley's kind of doing his thing. But it's possible, Bautista's he's gonna get it. The next fight, Jim Miller. Ooh, another old guy to kick off the new year. 40 years old, 36-17 record versus Gabriel Benitez. Both come in at -110 for this fight. Both southpaws. Looks like Jim Miller has better striking, but Benitez has better takedown accuracy. Let's take a look at their last fights and see. Jim Miller went 1-1 last year, a victory over Butler by knockout and a submission. Oh no, excuse me, a decision loss to Hernandez in February. Benitez hasn't fought since 2022, so that's an interesting thing to note as well. His last win coming by knockout in the first round. Fight before that against David Onama, he was knocked out in the first round. So he looks like he's a guy who goes out swinging, even though ESPN has him listed as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy and Jim Miller being a wrestler. Let's go ahead and go with Benitez in this one, coming off of whatever he's coming off of. I'm feeling like, he hasn't fought in over a year. So he's really going to come in and put the old guy back in his place. There's a time and place for everything, and it's time to retire when it's time to retire. Mr. 36-17. Jim Miller, the sport loves you, but hey, sometimes it's time for a different guy to come in and get a victory. And that's what I'm expecting we'll see this upcoming Saturday on January 13th. Moving into the co-main event of the night, Matthias Nicolau versus Manel Cape. Nicolau 19 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. Cape is 19-6. Cape is also the favorite at -250, while Nicolau is a +205 underdog. Looks like Nicolau has more takedown averages per round than Cape, but Cape is a better striker. Let's take a look at some of their previous victories and losses. Okay, so Nicolau is actually coming off of a loss to Brandon Royval in 2023, who just had an impressive fight against the champion Pantoja for the belt in December. Unfortunately, he did not win. However, Cape is coming in on a 4 fight winning streak. And, you know, Cape is an interesting person after seeing his post fight interview. He got a little rough on his words, the verbiage he decided to use. But he's an interesting fighter. I've kind of grown to appreciate him a little bit, his skill set. So we're gonna go with Cape in the co-main event. And in the main event, we've got Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. Finally, we've made it to the final fight of the card. Ankalaev opens up at a negative 525 favorite, while Johnny Walker is a plus 375 underdog. Height difference, Walker being 6'6", Ankalaev is 6'3". But Ankalaev's record is 18-1-1. That one coming from his last fight, where there was called a no contest at the end. Johnny Walker is 21-7. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the winner of this fight could potentially be earning themselves a title shot against Alex Pereira. Ankalaev has a better chance at getting that title shot, I believe, with a win over Johnny Walker than Walker has at getting a win over Ankalaev. However, Ankalaev is also coming off of a loss, or well, it was a draw to Jan Blachowicz whenever they were competing for the strap, the light heavyweight belt on December 10th, 2022. So he hasn't had a win since 2022, while Johnny Walker has a dub on May 13th over Smith, Anthony Smith, decision. He defeated Paul Craig in January of 2023 and Kutalaba in September of 2022. So, the winner of this fight will go on to fight Jamal Hill. And that's kind of my prediction. The winner of this fight will get Jamal Hill. And then whoever wins that fight will earn their title shot against Alex Pereira. This one's going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be a banger of a fight. I mean, both of these guys emotionally, they both want this victory. They wanted to slug it out after the refs stopped the fight. They were ready to go at it in the octagon. So there's a lot of emotion behind this one. Ankalaev most likely is who we should lean towards, but don't discount Johnny Walker for a surprising KO knockout, to get the win. But just to kind of save our parlay a little bit, let's go ahead and go with Ankalaev at minus 525. So these are a bit different on ESPN's betting than they are on Bet365, which is the app that I decide to use. So we'll put this in and see what kind of wager this is going to get. How many fights is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 fights on Saturday. If I'm able to get all of them correct, that is a freaking Hail Mary of a prediction. I've done it before. I've absolutely gotten all the fights on the card correctly before, multiple times. So, what better way to kick off UFC 2024 than by getting all 12 correct on the first fight night? Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. What a fight. I'm excited. Um, and there's just a lot to look forward to moving forward, especially because UFC 297 is coming up the following Saturday. Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight championship of the world, while Myra Bueno Silva is fighting Raquel Pennington for the women's bantamweight championship. So 2 fights coming up at UFC 297. Really excited for that one. That one's going to be in Canada. I think it's in Toronto, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, super excited for that one. Sean Strickland versus du Plessis has been built up. Strickland, of course, assaulted this man at 296. Just, I don't know why Dana White decided to sit them so close together, but he said, hey, he'll take the blame for them getting into it. It is what it is. And yeah, I mean, we'll revisit that and discuss that card again next week. so that way we kind of have a better idea of what to expect. It was actually really fun going through looking at whose previous wins, these fighters have gotten previous, if they've been knocked out, if they've been submitted, what to expect, kind of, who's the underdog, who's the favorite, and kind of build a parlay. I really enjoyed this. And I'm looking forward to doing it for the rest of the year. This was a interesting one. We will make another video on Sunday with the results, and hopefully, hey, if I got them all right, then we'll be 1-0, baby. We'll be celebrating again, just like I'm celebrating the Pacers going 6-0, the New York Jets getting the dub today, and hopefully we'll get the dub next week. So I want to say thank you for everyone who tuned in, and yeah, we'll see you again next week. Hopefully with some wins. Maybe I'll have some different content to talk about. Like I said, there's not really much to really discuss. It's the new year. I could do like my favorite artist of the year and this and that, and that would be fun. But let's let's let it build a little bit. Um, we listened to a lot of music last year. Lil Yachty was my number one streamed artist on Spotify, which I thought was kind of interesting, but I did really enjoy his album. So at the same time, not too surprising. Um, yeah. One last time, thank you for tuning in, and I'm out.